This is week 3 of our Lenten study for 2025, where we're looking at the question of where we can look in the Bible to kind of ground ourselves, to kind of put ourselves in biblical context while still dealing with some of the uncertainty and some of the struggle that we have to face today. This week we're looking at the Epistle of James. Now it's not a letter that most people spend time with. An epistle means essentially a descriptive letter, or a letter explaining something or going on about something, trying to teach something. It's not just your average, hey, how you doing kind of letter. But where James is really different in is that it seems to be a series of sayings all put together. Some have connected it to like the book of Proverbs, but it's more coherent than that. It's not just a bunch of sayings. There looks like there's a genuine theology in it, a genuine desire to help people understand. First of all, let's put it in a historical context. Starting with the early church, there was a tradition of trying to place all the books that we accept as canon into the hands of as many of the original 12 named apostles as possible. Now, this falls apart for a number of reasons. First of all, if we did that, we had essentially reduced the Christian population in the early centuries to maybe 20 people. You know, you can't have the same people doing the same thing over and over again. There would have been more than one John. There's more than one James already. There's more than one Zacchaeus. There's more than one Lazarus. At least 6 Marys, if not more. So we can't reduce it to saying, oh, James, must have been the brother of Jesus, or must have been one of the disciples, which is what the early church tried to do. The second thing we have to recognize is that if we know anything about the people that Jesus called, they were not highly educated at all. These are folks who worked the land, who worked the water. So when you go into the letters, the back half of the Christian scriptures, it's all done in Greek. In fact, the entire Christian scripture is done in Greek. And some of it is very elevated Greek. So the chances of someone who has spent most of their life on a fishing boat being able to write advanced Greek, which I understand is a very, very difficult language to master. My background's Hebrew. I have nothing to work with Greek. I'm just told that it's a very difficult language. So the chance of people who speak it colloquially or for business does not mean that they are going to be fairly articulate in writing it or even dictating it to scribes. So the chance of any of these things being written by the disciples are next to nil. The other thing we have going on is the timeline. If you assume the 12 named disciples and all the others around were working in the first 30 years of the Common Era, and then we have Paul working from about year 35 to about 50, 55, somewhere in there. Then we have, and that's the first generation or second generation, depending on how you're counting. And then we have another generation after that. And then we have the Gospels actually being written down. So you get further away from the actual people who lived in the first generation of the Christian community who knew Jesus personally. And when we're looking at the letter of James, we don't see any reference in it to, I know Jesus and he said this and he said that. It's more advanced and developed than that. So I would suggest, and there's a couple of references through that even talk about a more organized church than would have been in the first century. So I would assume, given what I know of Christian history, that we're looking at a letter that was probably in a tradition of a school. So when Jesus was wandering around and had sort of schools around him, the followers around him, that was not uncommon. That was actually a very regular thing to do. And teachers would gather students around them, and then those students would write or teach themselves, but they would still give credit to their original teacher or their most impressive teacher. And that became the school of. So we have the school of Mary Magdalene is believed to have produced both the Gospel of Mary and quite potentially the Gospel of John. jury's out, but good scholarship has suggested that, and I certainly accept a lot of that scholarship. So we've got a school of James, we've got a school of John that brought these letters, and maybe the book of Revelation, maybe that was connected with another John, quite possible. So we've got all of these communities growing and trying to work out theology. And remember, this is long before the Greek part of the church organized everybody together to bang out our idea of Trinity, of Christology, of pneumatology, or all those other big ology words. So people are still trying to figure this out as we go along. So I am placing James, and this is my scholarly work, I'm placing James around the year 120, 140 of the Common Era. What was going on then is Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian, so the Hadrian's Wall between England and Scotland, that Hadrian was in charge. He was the emperor of Rome. And it was at this point in time that Rome is as large as it ever gets, with as many interests as possible. And Hadrian is noted as saying to some of his governors, don't go after the Christians just because they're Christian. Let them alone unless they actually commit a crime. So under Hadrian, it was one of the times of incredible peace for Christians around the Roman Empire, allowing the religion to grow, essentially. And again, we look at James, there is no reference to any struggle. The references to good and evil are all cosmic level. They're not individual level. They're not putting up with some of the extremes that were seen a couple of generations before, a couple of decades before, when the book of Revelation was written and there was a real hostility between Rome. That's not James's issue. James, reading through, was probably one of the Hebrew diaspora. So these are people who would have been kicked out of Judea and Jerusalem when the temple was destroyed. Chances are he was the children of, maybe even the grandchild of, because he doesn't reference that either. He just talks about the diaspora as a thing and calling on the lost tribes, all 12 of them, not just the 10 that were in northern Galilee, but all of them. And he identifies himself as one of them. And as you go through James, it was kind of funny actually. The Bible I was using would have this much about James and this much commentary. Everything James is talking about is in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus. It's all based in Scripture. So he is not just pulling this around. He is basing it completely as a Hebrew early Christian with a Hebrew background, very, very familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures, not the least bit caught up in the politics of the day as far as capital P, but very much caught up in the how we treat each other, so small p, which is why he's where I'm looking for this session where we talk about how we can respond to the politics of the day. So he's very grounded, and that's one of the things that comes up again and again in the the Epistle of James. Find your grounding. Find your place. Do not get caught up. This goes back to our first Lenten study. We talked about it again last week. Ground yourself. There is nothing chaotic leadership enjoys more than people who are also chaotic and caught up above. One of the ways we can resist chaotic leadership is just to stand our ground, know what we stand for, be able to articulate it maybe, feel it for sure, but do not get caught up in the winds of change and the rhetoric and the slogans and the 2 or 3 word memes. Don't get caught up in that, because all of it is aimed at keeping you churned up. So the best way we can respond is by not responding. So keep yourself grounded. That's one of the very first things that James tells folks is make sure you know who you are. Make sure you understand what justice is. Make sure you understand what action is. there's a lot of similarities between James's writings and the Sermon on the Mount. Now, we looked at the Sermon on the Plain last week, which is Luke's version, which is a very practical thing. Matthew's Sermon on the Mount is much more spiritual, and that's kind of the tone that James takes. So right off the hop, he starts chapter 1, don't test God. Don't get into the whole foolishness of temptation. Don't challenge. Don't assume you're being challenged by God either, because that's not a thing. Know who you are. Don't be tempted. Don't be caught up. Don't be seduced by what's going on around you. Keep it humble. Keep it focused. Keep it simple. And keep your eye on God. Then it goes right into, again, ground yourself, but know where generosity comes from. So you're not looking for all this energy inside of you. You're looking for this energy as gifts from God. And that's a really important thing. One of the reasons why those who are in aid organizations or in social justice movements, if you are a person there because of your faith, there is more energy there than if you were a person who denies faith altogether but are just struggling for justice. And this has been borne out through my observation, through various things I've heard over the while. I've not read any particular sociological paper about it. Didn't get that out. I haven't read any sociological papers specifically on this matter, but I have certainly read enough anecdotal evidence and some research that says that when you are a person of faith, there is an extra place of energy, of sustainability that we call upon for the fight. And that's one of the things that James reminds you. That generosity, that care, that direction, that our need for justice, we don't create that in ourselves. These are gifts we are given. We just have to be open to it. So that's part of grounding ourselves. We're not just planting our feet firm, but we're opening our hearts to what the gifts that God has given us. And we cannot overlook the fact that that is the source. We are not our own sources of energy. Very important for sustainability, or else you will crumble under the weight of exhaustion, mentally and emotionally. So James is giving us a key as to how we can avoid that. Then he goes in about not being caught up in the anger, being very slow to anger. Now, I do want to speak about that for a little bit, because we, the Barefoot Evangelist podcast this past week, talked about the power of anger, the usefulness of anger. James is being very specific about destructive anger. He's not seeing it as a force that kind of propels us forward. And I mean, in many ways, he is a privileged person. He is either writing or dictating. He is not feeling immediate threat. Arguably male. So society works for him. When we're talking about using anger for power, that's usually people who do not have much power. And so we are trying to find our other sources. Righteous anger is a thing. James does not talk about that. So that's not what he is saying. Don't bring that up. He's talking about the destructive type alone. So do not get caught up in destructive anger. And you're going to see this a lot from politicians, where they want us to be angry about some really silly things, if you really break it down. You have to listen for that and just kind of let it go. If it has real legs, if it has something, it's an issue you really, really need to deal with, it'll keep coming up. It's not like it's going to fly past you and it's going to be forgotten forever. So you don't have to chase it. You don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to focus on it. Real issues of justice are again and again and again. And one of the ways we can know this is that the problems we have today are here, problems talked about 2,000, 3,000 years ago in our Holy Scripture. Humans are going to human. And one of the ways we do that is trying to remind the powerful and often the rich that we've got to pull them back from time to time. And that's what we're on the brink of right now. Pulling them back, getting ourselves kind of giving a reset to what's going on. And part of that reset is simply our actions. and placing our actions within faith and not being caught up in the chaos or the negativity or the who's responsible, because those are endless conversations. They just do not create anything sustainable or living in order to make a change. And then James talks about religion. Now, that's a word that's very misunderstood today. Religion is being thrown around, particularly if people are against religion. They haven't taken that to explain what exactly that means, because the word means different things to different people. Are we talking institution of religion? Are we talking all faith? Are we talking just faith, our own faith? Or how is that defined? Very, very significantly. So when we return to James, we have to look at the word religion, meaning ethical piety. He's warning, don't get caught up in the letter of the law. Don't get sucked into legalistic justification that excludes other concerns. Don't obsess about it, because it's a distraction, and it is so easy to do. I dare anybody who has ever walked into a mosque or a synagogue or a temple or a church to not have had the experience of someone judging them about their appearance, about their language, about their hair, about their cleanliness, about their odor. Someone is always judging. That's easy. That is such low-lying fruit. It doesn't even deserve attention, except that we all kind of have to give name to it. That's the kind of piety James is talking to, who are so caught up in their own version of self-righteousness that they can't even see that they're missing the point. We talked about this a little bit last week with the whole log and the splinter thing in the eye. So James is saying not get caught up in ethical piety. And one of the ways we can ensure that we're not caught up, according to James, is to be focused on the vulnerable. Widows and orphans are the metaphor for vulnerable that comes up again and again and again in Scripture. And so here James is again, make sure the widows and orphans are taken care of. They're the most vulnerable, the most easily to fall off social concerns. So prioritize them. In this day and age, we can add to them. We can add racialized people. We can add people with disabilities. We can add mental and physical health issues. There's so many things we can add to who are the vulnerable. So widows and orphans are not enclosed categories. They're metaphorical categories that include widows and orphans, but they also include anybody else who is in danger of being left behind or being overlooked or falling off. And he reminds us that we are to be in solidarity with the poor. That is kind of what Jesus did. It's what we're called to do as well. It's very easy to get caught up with the rich. You know, I was always raised with the keep up with the Joneses metaphor. We are always looking, and you know, as a kid, as an adult, it was very easy to feel that we were lacking because we didn't have all the material goods that our cousins had or the neighbors had. Couldn't do the vacations, couldn't do a whole lot of things because we just didn't have the money to do it. Now, as adults, I have learned how empty those lives were. But we are taught through capitalism and through our Western society that is where we value people. James is sticking with the gospel line on this one. Don't get caught up in it. Don't get caught up in worldly values. Find your solidarity in those who are vulnerable. Again, goes back to the widows and orphans, but it's very specific. Look to the people who do not have much, because they actually have something that those who are privileged need to learn and need to pay attention to. It doesn't necessarily mean a total inverse in society. No one's suggesting that, but it does suggest a leveling of the playing field. And he comes out and actually says, the rich do the oppressing. That's chapter 2, verse 6. The rich are the oppressors. I will call them the parasite class. They're the first ones to say that the poor are dragging down society because of the social network, social safety network, and that's actually the opposite. Those who truly benefit the most from the redistribution of wealth are the rich, who manage to put all sorts of things in play to get money shifted towards them. It's one of the reasons we are seeing collapse so often in society, and where any political party that wants to privilege the rich and tax everybody else is doomed to fail, because you can't keep a top-heavy triangle on point. Society only works when the money has been redistributed to the people who will actually use it, the majority, the people who are poor, the people who are struggling. So that is something we can also do, especially in Canada, where we're looking at an election. Who are the ones who are going to look out for the majority and not make things easy for the minority who are the richest already? Again, strict gospel line here. There's no difference from what Jesus has taught any of us. Going along, James also talks about obedience to the law, obsessiveness to the law, this whole ethical piety thing. But he goes in a little more to it, and he's saying, do not be caught up in the immediacy of one law, because chances are, if you focus too hard on one law, you will miss the fact that you're also guilty of breaking other laws. And if you're going to hold fast to one, you got to hold fast to them all. So, have a little grace in there. Don't obsess about it, and certainly don't be judging other people. Again, something we can do in our grounding, in knowing where our sense of acceptance is. Don't now us start looking around and say, you are not good enough for my sense of solidarity, my sense of the way we need to go. One of the biggest, I'll call it sins, of progressive left-leaning people is that we judge each other, and we get muddled in that. And here is James saying, don't get caught into that trap. It is super simple. It is super easy. It is super prevalent. Don't get caught into that trap. That becomes part of the distraction and the chaos that anyone who wants to destroy society is going to encourage. So be on guard for that, whether it's coming out of our media or our social media or our friendship groups or politicians or the market economy. Doesn't matter the source. Pay attention to those who want infighting as opposed to dealing with the real issues of society. And then he says something that has created a little bit of controversy throughout church history. And he talks about works. Where are our actions? And he says, anybody can have faith, but if you do not put the faith into action, then what's the good of it? Now, Martin Luther made the mistaken assumption that he's talking about work righteousness, where our works were good enough to justify and make us righteous. We didn't actually have to have faith and belief. That's not James's argument at all. He's dealing with a very specific group of people who are so caught up in legalism that they're missing the point of faith being a living, organic thing. But it will not matter if we're not putting that faith into action, into work, into what matters. And here's some direction for us. When we're feeling flubbed and we don't know how to respond, grounding ourselves, taking a look around and seeing where action can happen. It's one of the experiences, examples that are repeatedly given to us through the entirety of Scripture, not just the occasion here and there in the Christian books, but even the Hebrew books had the same thing. And what does works look like? I mean, it can be as simple as sharing your meal with someone. You don't need it all. They have nothing. That's easy to balance that out. Be kind. Here in Canada, we've got this thing called Canadian Showdown, where we basically help hold the door open for each other and encourage each other to go through. Like, that's an act of kindness. And in a world bent on telling you that everybody is hateful, it's an act of love. And it's silly, and we laugh, and we call it a Canadianism, but it's work is as simple as that. Holding the door open for someone, holding a coat, holding a chair, holding space, holding time. All of this is doable, and you do not have to be full of resources or time yourself to be able to do this. Simple little acts. That is faith in action. And ultimately, The only thing we can do as people of faith is to put our faith into action. And it's not up to us individually, but collectively, enough faith will actually move things forward. And that's where we have to focus a lot of our energy. And then James says, don't all of you become teachers. It's one of the simplest things to do once you have a new awakening, a new realization, is to, I've got to tell everybody about it now. And very quickly after that comes a sense of judgment. I'm going to tell you, but you got to do things my way. Christian history is full of people like that. And James says, don't fall into that trap. We don't need that many teachers. We need people who are going to live it, who are going to be examples, who are going to show. He said, because teachers are going to be judged more fiercely. Quite frankly, if you're going to be someone who is going to put yourself as a demonstration, you better measure up. It's a lot of pressure. Be worthy of that. So for most of you, don't even bother. There's other things you can be part of. Now, he doesn't go into what some of those examples are, but you can kind of read through other scriptures, kind of where that's pointing. So do not think you have to go out and start your own community with people around you. It's good enough to be part of existing communities and support each other. Don't put that additional pressure on yourself. Don't get caught up in worldly arguments. It is so easy. It's almost fun sometimes, really, to kind of be that sitting around a pub with a pitcher on the table and get into arguments about things. Do that for enjoyment, but do not think arguments are social action. They're not. They might be off-gassing, they might be working out an argument, they might be working out a position. But do not get caught in endless arguments. They're not going to work out. And there are some people who just want to keep you, again, that's the chaos, churning in arguments. And if you're caught in that vortex, you're essentially removing yourself from the action that everybody else is expecting. So don't get caught up into that. It's a trap. Doesn't mean you can't have words with someone or bang out something, a point of thought that you're working through. But just be aware that there's some people who just want to argue about things. Do not give in to that. It's not going to matter. It's not going to be effective. Again, comes back to grounding yourself. If you know who you are, you know what you believe, you know where we should be going or have a really good sense about that, you don't have to justify that. Enough people already share those principles that you will find your community. It doesn't have to be someone who is arguing with you, because chances are they just want to argue. They're not interested in the least bit in living faith or in growth. They just want to be difficult. Just let it go. Let it go. Do not be part of that. And connected to that, don't be caught in speaking negatively. Goes back to ethical piety. Don't get caught up in this. We're going through an election right now, and I guarantee you every single political party that I have listened to, some has been pointing out the negativity of each other. Now, some of that's decent because we've got to kind of shift through and say, wait a minute, that's a spin, and that's a real issue that we have to deal with. But a lot of it is just, again, distraction. A lot of it is judging and trying to encourage us as the voters of Canada to share their sense of judgment, whether it's legitimately theirs or they just want to get political talking points. That's an open conversation. But don't get caught in judging each other. Again, this is a distraction. Don't give into that. Focus. Be the change. Live the change. And finally, he says, if you're suffering, pray. If you're cheerful, praise. If you're sick, ask for healing. If you've sinned, ask for forgiveness. This is the tradition of our faith. We will all fail. We will all suffer. We will all have times of rejoicing. We will all have times of needing each other. In those moments, respond with our liturgies and our rituals, and then get on with what's next. Again, don't get caught up in religiosity. Don't get caught up in the doing religion right. All of our faith, all of it is just to ground us in why and to help us focus on how and what. Our how is whatever method we employ. Our what is to bring justice. And it can be small or it can be grand. It's all the same in God's eyes. All of us are called to be part of that. The Epistle to James, whoever he's writing to, the diaspora, an individual community, we don't really know. That's lost through history. Whoever received this letter first, these are the lessons that the community of James wanted passed on. The next 2 weeks of our Lenten series, we're going to be looking at people who actually enacted this. All of this entire Lenten series goes back to a friend who said, where can we look in Scripture? Where can we look in our history to ground ourselves, to focus so we can make a difference? Make it make sense, essentially, was what I was being asked. I'm hoping we will all be able to see not only how the Scripture has directed us, but also the people who shared our faith in the past, how they have learned to live it out. So that'll be the last 2 weeks of our Lenten study. I'll see you next week.